Hi, everyone. My name is Juliana Willems. I am the owner and head trainer at JW Dog Training. We're a small private training company in the DC area. We specialize in everything from puppies, setting owners up for success, and to fear, reactivity, aggression, adolescence, manners, a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today. So I am so thrilled to be here today. I love doing my webinars with Your Dog's Friend. And Deborah asked me to do this topic, and I agreed because I think it's a great topic and anything I can do to help. But I knew it was going to be a lot. And I said, oh, it's out in October, no big deal. I have time to work on it. And I was definitely kind of putting it off because, man, guys, this topic is a doozy. It is a little bit complex. There's a lot of pieces to it. And I know that I'm speaking to people of all different kind of training backgrounds and understanding. And so to kind of get everybody on the same page is going to be a lot. And this is probably going to be one of my longer webinars that I usually try to stick to as fast as I can. But the good news is I have a lot of videos today. I think it's going to be really interesting for you. And I think you'll get a lot out of it. But just please keep in mind, this is a complex topic. And no matter how much I try to share with you today in these hour and a half, 2 hours, there's so much more to the topic. And there are going to be things that apply differently with your dog. And you might have trouble training on your own. And so just really keep that in mind. As Deborah said, I love questions. Please ask questions, but save your maybe my dog questions about your own particular dog to later, or you can email me. All my contact information is going to be at the end. But I really want to make sure that I'm answering everybody's questions about this stuff because, as I said, this is going to be a lot. So please ask away. I have access to the chat. I will answer your questions as we go, or I'll save it for the end. So thank you again so much for being here. All right, so we all want friendly dogs, right? But is there a way that can backfire? So today I'm going to be including videos, so many videos. Some are my clients, some are amazing friends, trainers, dog owners that I have met on Instagram that have great video content for you guys today. Everybody who contributed videos is going to be featured. I listed their name on each slide. And so please, I highly recommend that you go follow them, get more information about these dogs. So this is a great video from Suburban Paws Pet Care. This is a black German Shepherd named Levi. Levi is going to be the dog at the front of the screen, and this is him off leash. Super friendly, lovely body language. He's walking in curves. He's got a low sweeping tail wag. He is absolutely lovely off leash and enjoying his time with this other dog. Now, a lot of these videos, guys, I'm going to have you watch with the volume off because what I really care about is that you watch the body language. I don't really, a lot of times in videos, and I'm realizing I'm a big contributor to this. There's a lot of chatter in the background. I'm apparently a very talkative trainer. So a lot of these videos, if they're on mute, there's a reason for that. So this is Levi on leash. All right, well, that's a bummer because that one I did want you hearing. So I'm not sure why the volume is not on because that was big, loud barks from Levi. And it was a far cry from what he was displaying, which was that really lovely body language when he was off leash. And so now that I know that there's not volume to the videos, I will go ahead and narrate them a little bit more. So again, that was Levi barking quite a bit. And I'm just going to quickly show you. So, oh, there we go. Now it looks like we got some volume. So again, far cry from how he was off leash, right? So this is all that we're going to talk about today. Dogs who are seemingly friendly and enjoy playing with dogs off leash, but can develop reactivity on leash. So it's really important to understand dog-dog sociability development and different sociability levels, because this really plays into where and why our dogs are acting the way that they are. So on one end of the spectrum, you have social dogs. These are dogs who love all other dogs, regardless of what the other dog does. They seek out dog interaction. They enjoy being with other dogs. They thrive and they enjoy just being and playing with other dogs. And then we move down the spectrum. You have dog tolerant. What this means is that your dog doesn't really care about other dogs. They're not necessarily social because they're not outwardly looking to play with other dogs, but they don't mind dogs. They're not reactive necessarily. They're kind of indifferent. They might have some doggy friends, but they're mostly indifferent. And then you have dog selective. So this is where the category of a lot of dogs fall into, especially if they're quote unquote reactive, where they might have some doggy friends, but they also have strong feelings of disliking or not liking other dogs. So, they're not necessarily, they don't dislike all dogs, but they certainly aren't social. They're kind of a mix, and that's where they're selective. Tolerant and selective are different because tolerant, they're kind of like, meh, I don't care about you. And selective, they're like, oh, I really don't like you. So there's a little bit more probably reactivity happening there. And then on the other end of the spectrum from dog social is dog aggressive. And these are dogs that really dislike most dogs. They might do damage if they get in contact with another dog, and they're not enjoying being around dogs. They're not enjoying interacting with them, passing them, playing with them. They're just single. They're human dog type of people. So, or type of dogs. And it's really important to kind of see as dogs age, where they fall. So dog social, this is where we typically find puppies. Puppies think, ooh, I love everyone. I want to go meet everyone. They're seeking out dog interactions. They're very social. And this is I should say, normal puppy behavior. If we're seeing some fear, stuff like that, that's usually where more on the abnormal side of the spectrum. But typically puppies are very dog social. Teenagers can also find themselves in the social category, meaning, again, ooh, be my friend, I really love you. It's when dogs hit social maturity and reach adulthood that they then start to fall into these other categories. It's extremely common for dogs to become less social as they get older. And we're going to talk all about why this is important. But my main reason for showing you guys this spectrum is that it's important to remember not all dogs like other dogs. It's very normal for your social outgoing puppy to stop liking dogs as much, not want or need dog play as much, and for them to become a little bit more selective. So here's a little what we call tax. I'll let you watch some puppy videos as we get started. So in puppyhood, we are so focused on puppy play and socializing, right? We say, meet the dogs, meet all of the dogs. And we let our dogs play and interact with puppies and dogs. And this is a very normal part of puppyhood, puppy development, puppy ownership. We are often seeking out play opportunities for our dogs. And these two are just looking so cute. They're really great play partners. And this is, like I said, really on our list of, okay, we have a new puppy, let's let them go meet other puppies. And this kind of puppy play that we seek out, we start to then see wanting to meet other puppies and dogs on leash, right? So your puppy is like, man, I love playing with other puppies on leash. So now I want to meet all my friends on leash. And this is a great video from my friend Jess and her dog Stanley of meeting a puppy friend on leash. Again, I'm having you watch it without the volume because I want you to watch the body language. So what I wanted you to see with this video is just kind of that light bulb that goes off with their dogs where they go, ooh, another dog, and they beeline for each other. Super cute, super friendly, super appropriate at this age. But what I'm going to start to do is plant a seed of be careful about how many on-leash interactions you have that look like this, especially starting so young. So your puppy, we're going to categorize puppy as about eight weeks old to about, 4 or 5 months. And then when they hit about 6 months, that's when they hit adolescence. Now, I have given a whole 2-hour talk about adolescents and dogs and teenagers and having a teenage dog. And I'm pretty sure you can find that on the Your Dog's Friend YouTube page because it's quite the challenging time together. And this is an interesting time in a dog's life. It's just like a human teenage phase. They're going through a lot of changes, right? So, but the thing about teenagers is they often lack social skills, and it can cause them to be really rude, over the top, and inappropriate when meeting other dogs. They will literally rush into greetings with other dogs. They go full force, be my friend. And they fly in and they are all over the place. And they are just, a lot of other dogs do not exactly enjoy having an on-leash greeting with a teenager. And this is all quite normal because, again, teenagers are just over the top in every way. Their energy levels, their exuberance, it's a tough phase. And we see that manifest in their social skills. And what happens is this exuberance can cause negative reactions from other dogs, very understandably. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. But what's more important is that teenagers don't necessarily take social cues from other dogs. They're not backing off when they're told. They're like, oh, you gave me a correction? Cool. I'm going to come back for more. So they're not listening to those very normal and appropriate communication from other dogs saying, hey, that's too much for me. Back off, please. The teenager does not know what back off means. And also what's really important to know here is that your teenage dog can become obsessed with other dogs. They can start loving other dogs so much that they seek them out, and the whole world shuts off when your teenage dog sees another dog because they just love other dogs and they crave them so much. So this is a video from Canine Lifestyle Academy, my friend Bethany. This is her dog, Juno. Juno's the white dog, and I want you to just kind of watch, again, the body language. This is extremely friendly. It's just what we would categorize as a little rude, a little inappropriate, a little bit, kind of in your face. So just watch for a second. So you see Juno jumping around, jumping in the dog's face. Be my friend, be my friend. It's very cute, but it can be a lot. And that black dog was extremely tolerant and seemed pretty receptive. But it wouldn't have been unheard of if the other dog that Juno was meeting said a little bit like, whoa, that's a little too much for me. And what would have been a more appropriate greeting is, so we really like nose to butt, and I apologize for not including a kind of like a desirable greeting video in this, but we really like to see what we call C-spines, where the dogs are sniffing nose to butt and they're kind of circling around each other, and maybe there's not quite that exuberance and intensity, unless both dogs like it, in which case neither dog is going to get upset, but that also causes other problems, which we'll talk about. And so something happened with my chat window where a couple questions got out of the chat. So if you guys, I can't find them anymore. So if you asked a question in the last couple minutes, just copy and paste it again if you don't mind. Thank you. So you have your puppy who you have them meet all these puppies, and they love meeting their puppy friends. And then this teenager kind of turns into I don't want to say jerky, but like a little bit of a jerk when meeting other dogs. Be my friend, right? And what happens as these teenagers continuously rush into these inappropriate greetings, they're also continuously receiving very appropriate interactions, very appropriate corrections from other dogs. And again, it can be extremely warranted, meaning the other dog says, that's too much for me. But what happens is our teenage dogs become less tolerant as they age, as a dog reaches adulthood. So social maturity for a dog is about, depending on the size of the dog, anywhere from 1.5 years for small dogs to about 2 to 3 years for big dogs. And when they hit social maturity, they become less tolerant. So what I feel like often happens is the teenager who used to be like, oh, you're correcting me. Cool. What do I care? I'm coming back. I'm coming back for more. I don't know what backing off means. I don't know how to be polite. The teenager starts to say, whoa, wait a second. Why are you talking to me like that? Or what did you just say to me? As they move towards adulthood. And soon I feel like we start to have these arguments where even though the teenager kind of started it and the correction was totally warranted from the other dog, the teenager then starts to escalate it. Or I should say the adult used to be teenager, now adult dog starts to escalate it. So you can start to see these dogs who used to just be really exuberant, rush into greetings, get the completely appropriate response, but suddenly that response over and over and over again is now causing them to say, okay, I'm going to fight back here. I don't like this anymore. You're going to talk smack to me. I'm going to talk smack to you. And you can see a big blow up. I was having a really wonderful conversation with the Suburban Paws Pet Care that Levi, the black dog that I showed at the beginning. And Kim was saying that Levi is so intense when he first starts, and he's so big and barky that if they weren't to intervene in terms of his behavior and he was to meet a dog, it would very likely turn into a fight, which is really common, even though, as we saw, he's great off leash. When you bring all that intensity to a dog who's starting to mature, unfortunately, it can go really far south. So what I'm going to talk about today, though, I think that, the bad reactions the dog gets from other dogs is certainly one piece of the puzzle. But what I'm going to talk more about today is kind of this leash frustration piece that is so common along friendly dogs. Now, we've gone over this a little bit, but I'm going to talk more, or I'm going to kind of lay out what the progression that I think happens. So as a puppy, you get lots of dog-dog play, right? We're socializing, we're wanting them to meet other dogs. And you spend puppyhood walking up to other dogs on leash, and your dog starts to love interacting with other dogs. And as they grow into a teenager, they love other dogs and they start to expect that they can say hi to other dogs on leash. But as your teenager gets bigger, they grow older, but they get bigger in size, we stop letting them greet dogs as much on leash. And this is very common. So whether it's just your dog is too big and you don't want them to meet other dogs, you're less focused on socialization. There are a number of reasons why we're going to stop allowing leash greetings. Probably you've realized that not all dogs want to be met on leash. And so you're not letting your dog meet those dogs that you think don't want to say hi. But for whatever reason, we're decreasing how frequently our dog gets to meet other dogs on leash. So because they're not able to meet as frequently on leash, they start to get frustrated. This is very normal. Wait a second, I spent the first 6 years of my life getting to say hi to dogs on leash, and now suddenly I can't say hi to every dog. This is very frustrating to me. Over time, as they grow up, that frustration is going to escalate. And think about it. If every time you saw another dog or you saw something that made you feel frustrated, oh, I just really want to get to that dog. I'm so frustrated. That starts to turn really into a bad feeling. Oh, I don't like seeing dogs anymore. They just make me feel frustrated. It's called what we call a negative conditioned emotional response. They start to not feel great when they see other dogs. They don't like it. And unfortunately, negative conditioned emotional responses are what cause reactivity. I don't like this. This really is frustrating to me. I need to express my emotions. I don't like this. And it can cause a really, really intense reaction. So as you can see, what you're seeing at this age, unfortunately, is starting all the way back at puppyhood. Now, we're going to talk about what to do about it now, but maybe you're in the situation where you have a young puppy and you can kind of prevent some of this stuff, because now you see where each step unfortunately leads to the next. So it is very normal for dogs to become dog tolerant or dog selective as they age. Meaning, okay, think about when you were 21 years old, you loved going to the bar, right? Or maybe you did, but you're partying, maybe you're still in college, you love meeting people. And then as you get older, you hit the age that the equivalent of social maturity in dogs, and you think, okay, I would much rather stay at home with my friends, with a glass of wine. I have no interest in going out anymore. And this is where it's similar to our dogs, where their preferences just change. And so if they start to become less interested in other dogs, it could be because other dogs start to annoy them as they get older. We already talked about their tolerance levels go down. They might have had some fear stuff when they were younger, and we didn't necessarily notice it, or maybe it didn't manifest too much. But as they hit social maturity, you might start seeing some of that fear come out and cause them to be reactive. And like I said, their preferences might just change. It is very normal for your social young puppy, teenage dog to kind of grow out of the dog park, grow out of rough and tumble play dates. This is super, super normal as they hit social maturity. And the reason that I'm saying this is because depending on where you are with your dog's age and the behaviors you've seen, there could be a number of reasons of why they're reactive. Today, I'm talking about mostly those super social, young, crazy, not very socially skilled dogs who might develop reactivity as they get older or already are developing reactivity. And it can be frustration, absolutely. That's a big driver. How do you know if it's frustration? Usually if your dog really loves off-leash play, meaning they thrive, they do really well, they're seeking it out, they interact with the dogs, that's how they are off-leash. But when they're on-leash, they are reactive, then it's usually frustration-based, but it can also be fear. And I'm not talking about fear-based reactivity today, but it is so critical that you understand reactivity is often driven by fear. And a lot of the stuff you're going to learn today will help, even if your dog is a little bit fearful, except the piece of, do they want to meet on leash? Are they nervous about meeting on leash? Or do they really want to have off-leash play? Would they prefer not to? That's going to be a piece that you're going to really think about when it comes to, how am I going to treat this reactivity that I'm seeing? And to quickly define reactivity, and I apologize because that is a label, and that is not necessarily, that label might not be the same to everyone. When I say reactivity, I mean any type of pulling, lunging, barking. There could be a little bit of growling going on, but any type of intense reaction to a stimuli. So that's what my definition of reactivity is going to be. And both frustrated and fearful dogs are likely to do better off leash, meaning frustrated dogs are likely to do better off leash because they can interact the way that they want. And fearful dogs are likely to do better off leash because if they're uncomfortable, they can move away. The thing about being off leash is your dog has choice and control in their interactions. They can move forward if they want to, or they can move away if they want to. And being on leash, unfortunately, removes all of those options. And so if you've got a fight or flight, or you've got a fearful dog and they're fight or flight, you're removing their flight option. So they might choose the fight option, which will look like reactivity. Or if you have a frustrated dog who can't move towards it, you're still going to see all that frustration-based reactivity like we just talked about. And you guys are asking great questions. And I know I said I would get to them while I was talking, but there's a lot going on and I can't totally keep track. So I will make sure that I will answer everything at the end. I'll be able to scroll through and answer everything. Okay, so like I said, maybe you're lucky and you have a young puppy who you're hoping to be proactive about preventing this from? Great. Unfortunately, for a lot of you, if you're here, you probably have a dog past the puppy age. And so you can't obviously do what I'm going to talk to you about, or maybe you're getting another puppy or your friend's getting another puppy. This is still really important information to know. It is so critical in puppyhood that we teach our puppies that they do not get to meet every dog that they see. This is so important. And the thing about socialization is we have this idea in our mind that you have to go meet, or socialization means meet every dog, like go meet that dog, go meet that dog, go meet that dog. And that's how you're going to get your dog, quote unquote, socialized and comfortable with other dogs. Unfortunately, that's not true. Not only is that not true, but it can backfire. Meaning if you, like everything we talked about, if you teach your puppy, go meet, go meet, go meet, you can easily create frustration later in life, unfortunately. And so what we recommend for socialization instead is positive exposure, meaning you can have your puppy watch other dogs from a distance. You should have your puppy watch other dogs at a distance. Get them used to seeing, not interacting, but just seeing dogs of different shapes, sizes, colors, coat textures. This is really, really important in socialization. Much more important than having your dog physically meet nose to nose or play with other dogs. So you can accomplish what you want with socialization, having your dog be comfortable around other dogs, not scared of them, without your puppy meeting other dogs. Now, this is little Austin. He is the most precious little golden retriever puppy, as you can see. Now with Austin, I played a socialization game called the blanket game, where Austin and I went out and we sat on this blanket, which we had to do because it's really important to keep him safe, that he sits on his blanket and doesn't move around where other dogs have been and there are potentially diseases. And we practiced just sitting on the blanket and watching the world go by. And if someone, whether it was a dog or a person, asked to approach, first, I've rewarded him a lot for just staying on the blanket, because what that does is it teaches him he's not going to approach every person that he sees. And then I added a piece of control or choice for him, that if somebody wanted to say hi to him, I allowed him to go to them once I rewarded him for being calm after he saw them. And where this is a little bit different is if Austin and I weren't so fixated on staying on the blanket, staying near me, staying with me, staying calm and getting treats for that, then Austin might be encouraged or choose to go approach every single dog that he sees, walk up to, meet. And again, in my mind, okay, I think that this is good for him, right? I think he should be meeting all these other dogs, but I might be creating a little bit of dog obsession, a little bit of, wow, dogs are so fun, moving away from handler, checking out from the human and approaching dogs is really fun. And you're creating these lifelong habits. So, all right, that was prevention and puppyhood, okay? Now I'm going to talk about what you can do now with your older dog who might be experiencing leash frustration. Prevention starts at home. So I cannot recommend enough increasing and really bulking up your dog's mental exercise at home. So our goal with mental and physical exercise at home is to let your dog let off steam before they go out the door. So if your dog is all pent up and they're 9 months old, peak exercise needs, and they're raring to go, and you walk out the door and you see a dog, they're gonna blow their lid. So we really recommend increasing their sniffing, chewing, and licking at home throughout the day. Now, I have a whole webinar that is on YouTube, Your Dog's Friend YouTube, that is about enrichment options. It's actually super short. It was one of the COVID series that I did. And I really recommend checking that out because it gives you a lot of ideas for how to work your dog's brain throughout the day. You might not kind of be able to wrap your head around, well, why does sniffing at home translate to calmer when seeing dogs? But any type of mental exercise is going to use up that brain power, take the edge off, tire your dog out just a little bit, so that when they walk out the door ready to go experience triggers and see the world, they're not as raring to go. In addition, I definitely recommend increasing aerobic exercise at home before you head out the door. So again, this means get some of their steam off before you walk outside. Give your dog an advantage instead of walking out at the door where they are just ready to explode at the first sign of excitement. So I really love a flirt pole for aerobic exercise. And what this means is it's something that your dog chases after. It's like a cat toy for dogs. And this is so different than even like fetch or tug because it really gets your dog going. So this is a little puppy. Now she is not, I'm not dealing with leash frustration with her yet because I'm trying to be really proactive about it. But this is just an example of how the flirt pole works and why you can kind of see how it can really let them let off steam.
Charlie, good girl, let's go. Good job, good job. Whoa, good girl. Get it. Good girl. Good girl, good girl.
Okay, so that is just an example of run, run, run. Get your breathing up, get going. And if you have a yard or you have some space out front that you can hook your dog up to a long leash, this is a really great exercise. Now, really quickly, there was a question in the chat. Does a laser count instead of a flirt pole? I'm answering this because I strongly caution against using laser pointers for exercise. They can cause OCD and obsessive behaviors around lights and shadows. So absolutely do not use a laser pointer. I unfortunately have a client who made the mistake of using it one time and her dog developed OCD and had to go to a veterinary behaviorist. So definitely stick to flirt poles or other, if your dog does like fetch, that can be good. Anything else to get your dog moving and running around is going to be really, really good for them. Okay, wonderful. All right, so how can you help your dog before you even go out the door? Those were some great ideas. Okay, so training. All right, you guys, I cannot stress enough the improvements outside on leash around dogs are going to start with your training at home. This is the foundation of everything. Now, the good news is if you work for 5 minutes a day on this training, you will start to see improvements outside. 10 minutes is fine. 20 minutes, whatever you want. But I like to tell people 5 minutes so you don't feel like it's a daunting task. 5 minutes a day will go a really, really long way. You're going to focus on teaching attention to you. Teach your dog that you are the best thing ever. Build default attention. Now, what I mean by default attention is your dog will start to choose to look at you without you asking. And this is critical. You do not want to always have to be nagging your dog for attention. So default attention means that you're going to reward your dog's choice for looking at you, whether you ask them to or not, especially if you don't ask them. This causes them to start making the choice more in the future. So I'm going to have you guys watch this quick video. It's about 2 minutes. I also use this for a COVID series for foundation behaviors. This is how you start to get your dog's attention without asking for it. So you can go ahead and watch this video.
Yes. Good. Yes, good girl. Oops. Yes. Yes. Girl. Yes. Yes. Girl. Yes. Yes. Girl. Yes. 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 Good girl.
Okay, so you guys are having some fantastic questions and comments in the chat. How do you carry this exercise outside of the house when there's so many distractions? This is a great question. And it's really important to remember, we don't want to go 0 to 100 when it comes to adding distractions or taking your training on the road, right? So you noticed I worked in the apartment and then I worked in the hallway. Now I'm working directly outside the apartment, somewhere she's familiar with. I would do all of this before then maybe going somewhere new or practicing in a totally new novel environment. So you want to see how you can add distractions kind of systematically and slowly and set your dog up for success. Another question was, do I do these exercises on leash even inside the house? So the answer is yes, definitely. We want to set ourselves up for success as well, meaning us as the humans, because our ability to juggle the leash and the treats and still get good timing is really, really important. If we don't practice on leash, then we go outside and suddenly we're fumbling around and we can't get that good timing that's going to be driving our good good results. So I highly recommend, you can do on leash and off leash. I think both are great. But the goal really is just to start to teach your dog, hey, choosing to look at me pays. Now, you'll notice I'm using a marker word here. I'm saying yes when Lola looks over at me. That's so that I can capture the exact moment she makes a good choice. You're going to see a lot of marker words being used here today. The marker yes always is followed by the treat. And because ultimately Lola's working for the food. And in this training exercises we're doing today, I'm going to be using food for all of them. It's really important. It's unlikely you're going to find a reinforcer, meaning something your dog likes, that's going to compete with other dogs. So that's why we're going to use food right now while we build these new habits. Great questions and comments. Really appreciating you guys. Okay, so that was how you're going to start to train default attention. Now, I wish I could tell you, I could talk 2 hours about how to train default attention, okay? But I can't. And that was a little bit of a preview about how to do it, where you literally just capture when they choose to look at you. But that's really going to be the cornerstone. Them looking back at you is going to be that cornerstone of how to improve their behavior on walks. Okay, so we had another, and this is another thing, guys. If you put your question in the chat, there's a good chance too that I'm going to get to it. I've seen a couple ones that are kind of about stuff that I am going to cover. So keep that in mind too as I keep going. So meeting your dog's play needs. All right, it is so important to give your social dog outlets for doggy play. And anytime our dog has a natural behavior that we're trying to work against, giving them appropriate outlets for that is really important. Now, this is only one piece to the puzzle. It is not the whole answer. Do not take away from this talk that your frustrated social dog who's starting to become reactive just needs more play. That is typically not going to be the answer. The answer is going to be play paired with lots of training and other interventions. Because if you simply add more play, it could often fuel your dog's obsession with other dogs. But I do think giving them off-leash play options is extremely important. Because if dogs only associate other dogs with playing, they're going to get more frustrated when they then can't play. But not getting any play can also be really frustrating. So unfortunately, it's about finding a balance. And that balance is going to be dependent on your own dog and what they need and what they like. And so you'll have to play around a little bit what kind of that sweet spot is, but finding that outlet for them is going to be very important. And I just there's a question in the chat about that last exercise I was doing. And thank you for clarifying, Amy, because I think this is if you had this question, others might as well. So when I talk about default attention, I mean that I want the dog to be looking at me. They don't necessarily need to be making eye contact, but I want that head at least faced in my direction. Okay. So training around other dogs, how to prevent frustration. All right. I talked a little about training unrelated to dogs. So that default attention training that I want you to do, you're not going to do that when dogs are around right away. Now I'm going to talk about training around other dogs at a distance, and then we're going to talk about on-leash greetings. But if you have a dog who from across the street or from across the park, they see another dog and they start getting frustrated, you're never going to get a good on-leash greeting at the end of that interaction, because that frustration is going to build the whole time. And by the time they ultimately get to greet on leash, if they get to greet on leash, they're going to explode. So we have to do a lot of work about preventing frustration before you even think about letting them meet other dogs on leash. And it's really important when you're seeing other dogs on leash that you're giving your dog information about what you do want them to do. A lot of times we think, don't react, don't pull towards, all this stuff. And that does not give our dog information about what we do want from them. And so these games are going to be options that you have to give your dog information. What do I want from you when you see another dog? This training should all be done at a distance at first, because if you get too close to the other dog, it's going to be too hard. Your dog's going to be unsuccessful. They might start reacting. You need to make sure that you're doing this work at what we call under threshold, so that your dog can think and they can learn and they can eat and they're in a good place for learning. These games are really part of creating predictability. And predictability is important because when the dog knows what to expect and an interaction is predictable, that takes the, oh, what's going to happen? Or, oh, am I going to get to say hi? Piece out of it. Let's have our dogs understand what they need to do, what's going to happen when we see another dog. So 2 training games we're going to talk about today is a game called Engage-Disengage and the 1-2-3 game. And again, these are simply games to give your dog information, what we do want from them around other dogs. It's going to create predictability so they know what to expect. And it's going to cause a lot of good stuff to happen with you, from you, when they're training with you in the presence of another dog. A lot of these guys, they're extremely motivated and they're so driven to say hi to the other dog that we become boring, we become unimportant, and we really need to increase our how much they care about us outside. I mean, and unfortunately, as much as we wish our dogs would choose us over the other dogs, they're clearly not, right? So we have to really, really step up our game to make ourselves more exciting. All right, so the Engage-Disengage game. I almost wish this game had a different name, because I think the Engage-Disengage game is a little bit confusing. But the goal with this behavior, or with this game, is to reward your dog for looking at other dogs and staying calm. Now, a lot of people, when they have issues with reactivity or their dog's making bad choices, we want the dog to look all the way back to us, look at us, respond to their name, respond to sit, or make a different choice in the presence of that dog. And while that's a great mentality, let's ask for something else. Unfortunately, a lot of times our dogs cannot meet that criteria. They cannot make the choice to disengage, not just disengage, but turn all the way away from the trigger, look at you, maybe sit, respond to their name, whatever it is. They can't do that. So they're unsuccessful. And then the opportunity for learning or reinforcing something is lost. And then we lose them and they go pull towards the other dog. So the goal with the Engage-Disengage game is we actually make it easier for the dogs. We lower our criteria. We find a point where they can be successful and we work from there. So with the Engage-Disengage game, we are marking with a yes and rewarding our dogs for looking calmly in step 1. So you see a dog, you see another dog, and you stay with me instead of pulling towards, barking, lunging. There are so many options that our dogs could do when we want them to just stay with us. So they can look in this exercise. In fact, we want them to look. So our first step is we're just going to reward them for looking calmly and not giving us that big reaction. Step 2 is we're going to have them look at the trigger and then look back at us. But again, we talked about disengaging from the trigger can be hard. So we're going to find a spot where we can meet them and they can be successful and go from there. So this is a video of step 1. This is a dog named Hero. Now this is a video where I was chit-chatting a whole bunch, so I put it on mute, and I'm going to just say yes when Hero's mom feeds. So I want you to pay attention to Hero's ears, because this is going to be an indicator when Hero notices the other dog. Hero is often chooses to bark and lunge, so we're going to capture the moment that Hero notices but stays with us, because what a lovely behavior, right? Okay, so again, I'm going to mark when we like the behavior that Hero's doing. So he hasn't noticed. Yes. 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 So that was really good. He didn't react. I think the dog is out of sight at this point. So see, yes, he actually saw it and looked back there. Yes. And then he starts to disengage, and mom rewards him for disengaging. He's looking, he sees very pretty tense. Yes. Yes. Good. So now I'm not sure where the trigger was there. I don't know why we weren't feeding him for looking back. Oh, look at that. There's the dog. So he sees it, and we're going to wait for him to look back. He didn't, but so we marked him for looking. Yes. And then we got out of there. We ended the interaction. So in this particular exercise, we are not waiting for the dog to look back at us initially. We are simply capturing the moment that he sees that dog and does not explode. Because again, what a lovely response. Sure, you can look at dogs, but I need you to stay with me and not explode and not start reacting. So we got in there the moment he saw them. And what that did is it prevented him from escalating. He had a pretty good experience. He was a little tense. You know, if you were to go back and watch the video, his tail was up, he was stiff, he was looking, but he wasn't yet reacting. So that was a really, really good exercise for him. This is where I would recommend you starting. Make it easy. Have your dog just get fed for looking at the dog. Now there's a question about how do we move to step 2 here? And the way that you're going to move to step 2 is you saw a little bit of it in Hero's video. You will start to see the dog offer the look back if we take too long, right? So the dog starts to connect, oh, seeing a dog means food. Let me preemptively start looking back. And progress here is not linear, meaning you're not one day going to be good with step 1, so suddenly you're always going to be waiting for the look back in step 2. It's going to depend on the trigger. If it's your dog's best friend or a dog they love and the dog is across the street, that's going to be much harder for them to move to step 2 with than a boring dog who's ignoring them 3 blocks away. Then maybe we wait them out. We say, can you look at the dog and choose to look back at me? But ultimately, we're waiting for them to start to associate, I see a dog, I look back, because that's a beautiful incompatible behavior to, again, pulling towards and lunging and starting to react. So now we're going to watch a video about step 2. This one, I think we're going to watch volume off again, but it's going to be pretty obvious where we are rewarding. So this is Rocky. He is a wonderful, wonderful young dog, and he is actually a little bit reactive to skateboards. So we're playing the Engage-Disengage. There are skateboards, if you look at the top of the screen above those chairs, there's skateboards up there moving around and being very skateboardy. And so we are playing the Engage-Disengage game with Rocky, but he is already at step 2. So you'll start to notice him look at the skateboards and look back at mom in anticipation of that treat. And it is lovely to watch. He sees it, he looks back. So I think mom is going to reward him for focusing on her because it's so lovely and you don't want those lovely opportunities to pass. So she slips him a treat, but I think we're going to get one more look at the trigger and look back. Lovely. And he is really under threshold here, meaning he's See, he looked at it and looked back. He is, his ears are back. They're not super forward. He's not super tense. He's able to look and look back, relax. He's eating. He's making great choices. He's learning and thinking. If these skateboards were closer, or if he, maybe we'd seen a lot of triggers that day, then he probably wouldn't have been able to hold it together like this and do such a lovely job, in which case we would have gotten him more distance, maybe given him a little break. It kind of depends on where he's at with the training. But this is what we would work towards with step 2, is getting your dog to look at the other dog and choose to look back at you. All right, so the 1, 2, 3 game. Okay, so Kayla, I think you're in here, which is awesome. So this is Toby. He is on Instagram, and he is a pit bull who has some fear reactivity stuff, but he loves playing with other dogs off leash. But he has a lot of that leash frustration and reactivity on leash. So the 1, 2, 3 game, this is where you literally just say 1, 2, 3, and then every time on 3, you give your dog a treat. And the first time I heard this, I was a little bit like, I'm sorry, you want me to say what? You want me to just count out loud to my dog? How is this going to help? But what this does is this creates predictability for your dog. It's a pattern game, and patterns are really, really helpful to dogs. It gives them something to focus on. It gives them something to know, okay, I know when she hits 3, I'm going to get food. And it's a really great way to help decrease their frustration, give them something to do, make sure they're still eating, make sure they're still working with us. This game is not contingent on their behavior. Of course, if they're reacting, we're not going to play the game, but they don't have to be looking at us. They don't have to be doing anything. They just get food on 3. And this is a Leslie McDevitt game. She's a wonderful trainer who has a lot of really creative approaches to reactivity. And this is Kayla and Toby applying it as they approach a dog that they're going to, I think, walk with.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
So really, really nice application to the 1, 2, 3 game. And my guess is if Kayla had started walking and just kept walking towards that dog, which we know Toby would have been thrilled once he got there. He was happy to see his friends, but that frustration would have built on the way there. So a couple things that causes him to then tune out his handler. This is what happens where dogs, they become so fixated on seeing the dog that there's not a conversation between you and your dog anymore. It's your dog saying, okay, see, I'm going to go see my friends. And that's where things can escalate and we don't have a way to get through to them. So the 1, 2, 3 game is a really simple game where we just give our dogs predictability and consistency and something to think about, and you prevent that frustration and you can prevent that reactivity. It's really, really simple. We had a question in the chat. What about dogs who aren't food motivated? Okay, so it is rare. As a trainer, I have seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dogs. It is rare that when I show up and somebody reports that their dog is not food motivated and I show up with a reinforcer, a type of food that competes with the distractions, that their dog doesn't suddenly say, oh, you're offering me hot dogs today. Oh, okay, yes, I will eat this around the exciting or the scary thing. Sure. Typically, when I hear dogs aren't food motivated, unfortunately, it means we haven't maybe tried something that they'll really work for. That can sometimes be the case. And another thing, which is really important to keep in mind, is that dogs, when they are overexcited or when they're scared, they're not going to eat. And I'm going to talk about that later, how eating in the presence of another dog is actually going to be part of our criteria. But we really, you want to be careful when you kind of write off the ability to use food or your dog's food motivation. And have you tried something tasty enough? Or is there something else fear-based or distraction-based going on that they're not eating? In which case you would need to back up and apply the training in an area where they can eat and then slowly increase the distraction. So really, really good question. Okay. All right. So we have now covered when you're not around dogs, you're going to practice your dog looking back at you. And then we've covered how to decrease frustration and build new behaviors around dogs. Now we're going to talk about the dreaded on-leash greeting. Okay, and I say dreaded because these are hard. These are very complicated, and on-leash greetings are a bit of unfortunately, a crapshoot, meaning you can't always control the other half of the equation, the other dog. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this afterwards, where are on-leash greetings worth it for your dog? Are they appropriate? Are they something your dog wants to do? Is it worth it for your training? So keep that in mind as we go through this. Now, this is just a funny video about kind of the default with our dogs when it comes to greeting other dogs on leash. Again, I say they tune out, they zone in, and they say, see ya, I'm going to say hi to my friend. Now, this is my good friend, Cynthia. She's a wonderful trainer in the DC area, and her dog Knox. And we had just gone through all of our training videos that you're going to see in a second. And then I said, well, wait a second, let me see if I can get a default video. And so Knox doesn't particularly care about this dog that I have. So it's not really a good example because he doesn't care too much. But I just wanted to show you what you guys are all probably very familiar with, which is you're running behind your dog as they approach another dog on leash. And for these videos, I am using a stuffed dog because, one, I didn't have access to a dog for these videos, and two, the best way to teach your dog is to teach in a low distraction environment, right? So what's less distracting than a fake dog? So you can go ahead and watch. So, and I was trying to make the dog exciting because Knox couldn't have cared less if it was standing up because he had just practiced ignoring it for 10 minutes. So he knocks it over. But I mean, this looks a lot like a regular leash greeting if the other dog was upright, right? You know, that your teenager's jumping and then you're kind of pulling them away. Come with me, come with me. So that is pretty common and probably what a lot of you guys have experienced. Now, we have a question. Do you have to teach your dog to meet on leash? Can they learn that being on leash means no greetings? Okay, if it was up to me, I would say, no, don't let your dog greet on leash because of all the reasons we've already talked about. I think there's a big benefit to skipping on leash greetings, but I also know that most people want their dogs to be able to greet on leash. I have to be realistic about my audience, and you guys are here probably because you either have been doing on-leash greetings or you want to do on-leash greetings. And so I'm hoping that you're going to take this information and really let it sink in about kind of the benefits and how to do it, the best ways to prevent this frustration. And then you can decide when you do or don't do on-leash greetings. And what I'm going to talk about today is kind of a compromise where we might do on-leash greetings, but there's going to be a signal that means we're going to greet on leash, which I'm going to talk about. Great question. Okay, so when you're approaching dogs, meaning you're about to do an on-leash greeting, the goal is really going to be to have your dog choose to focus on you instead of the other dog. And we have set the stage for this, right? Because of all the stuff that I've talked about, you're going to be increasing your dog's exercise at home. You're going to be doing a bunch of training at home to teach your dog to look at you. We're going to teach your dog better behavior when they see other dogs from a distance. So at this point, if you've done all of that, and now you're at the point where you're going to start doing some leash greetings should be much easier for you to accomplish what you're looking for, which is something that's a little bit more controlled and a little bit less your dog flying off the handle. So it's really important here, and we just talked a little bit about this, that it's really important that you use high value food. So what that means is you have to have a food that can compete with the motivation to want to go see dogs. Milk bones will not cut it. Zooks probably will not cut it. Those are training treats. They're usually on the lower end of the value scale. Stinky, squishy, and small. Anything, if it smells bad, your dog probably will like it. Regular lunch meats are great. Turkey, chicken, ham, peanut butter. There are a lot of options out there that will be high value enough to keep your dog's attention, or at least compete with the other dog, so that you at least have a chance. Because if you go out there with their kibble or the treat that they've always gotten, they will choose the dog over you, and that could be where your training is failing. So, okay. And just checking the chat real fast. All right, great. So what's also going to be really important is rewarding behavior that you like frequently around other dogs. So we're going to talk a lot about the behavior we're looking for. And I think a mistake people make, which I've talked about in my presentations before, is being stingy with their rewards. They're waiting for this big behavior from their dog to feed and to reward, and their dog can't meet that. So then their dog doesn't get rewarded for anything, and their dog chooses to go engage with the other dog. So it's going to be really important that you look for teeny tiny pieces of good behavior and reward those. I have another webinar on capturing good behavior that we talk a lot about this with. And I made a false promise earlier that my adolescence webinar was recorded, and it wasn't, but I think my capturing behavior is. So I have a feeling Nicole will clarify that in the chat. But your dog is always giving you good behavior. It just might be a tiny little slice, and it's really important that we reinforce that. Okay, so I love to teach a go say hi cue. So in talking about leash greetings and are they a good idea and will they hurt your progress or make your dog less frustrated, I think a game changer is a go say hi cue. What a go say hi cue is, it means your dog is allowed to approach the other dog to say hi. I think of it as their green light. Okay, you are allowed to go say hello now. And you would give this green light cue as a reward for your dog focusing on you or doing anything else that you like, right? So all of a sudden, you as the handler become the gateway to what they're looking for. You're the one that will give them the green light to go say hi. And what's really important here is that an absence of a go say hi cue is information to your dog. We're not saying hi today. You're going to get good stuff over this direction. You're not going to say hi. Let's keep moving. And what this can actually really decrease frustration, because there's not that question in there, that hope. Oh, am I going to say hi? I'm going to say hi. You teach a default. You look at me. We're moving. We're moving. You're not hearing the go say hi cue. Okay. You're going to stay focused on me, or we're going to pass the dog. Versus our default, checking in with you, walking, go say hi. Yes, I'm going to go approach the dog there, and then go from there, which we'll talk about. So, okay, I lied. My capturing talk, unfortunately, is not recorded. Sorry, guys. So, but what's really important is that we capture good choices, we reward them, and then those good choices lead to going to say hello to another dog, which is ultimately what they're looking for. So again, when we add that green light and it's predictable for our dogs, they know what it means, they know what the absence of it means, it can really decrease frustration. So I'm going to show a quick video from, oh no, my head is probably blocking who this is. This is Otis. He's in the DC area, Otis_unleashed on Instagram. His mom and I are really great friends. He's wonderful. I'm going to show you kind of the perfect world what go say hi would look like. Otis is not on leash here, but it still shows you what we're ultimately looking for.
Hey, go say hi.
I bet you didn't even think there was another dog there because of how focused on mom Otis was. Now, Otis's mom does a ton of training and has been working at this. He's a little bit older, so I think age and maturity goes into how successful your dog can be with this, but they have a really strong history of default attention to handler here. So how do we get there? You're like, that's great, Juliana. How do I accomplish that beautiful control and getting to your dog to look at you before going to say hi? Now, This is a training plan that I would recommend for teaching what earns your dog the release to go say hi. Now look at number 4 and 5, turning towards you and sitting in front of you, or sitting in front of you, waiting for release and then coming back to a sit afterwards. This is where you would think, okay, I'll just get my dog to sit around other dogs, right? You think that's pretty easy, but we have 3 steps before that, because sitting is actually not as easy as we would think. It is really hard. Again, they have to turn away from the dog and they have to make the choice to do a behavior in that moment. That's really hard. And so if you skipped to step 4, your dog likely wouldn't be successful. You wouldn't have luck. And you would think, okay, this isn't going to work. This isn't a good idea. But the work is in the foundation. So the first thing that I want our dog to practice is to get released to go say hi is eating food, because we've already had the question, what do we do when, our dog is not food motivated? A lot of times these dogs, when you offer them food in the presence of another dog, they don't care. They just want to get to the dog. So our first step is, can you eat in the presence of another dog? And you're going to see Knox in a second show us that taking a treat is going to be the gateway to going to say hi.
Good boy. Good. And then say go say hi. Perfect. Perfect. Go ahead and move him away before he realizes it's fake. Nice.
Come on, puppy, puppy.
Good.
Just lovely. Now, that was the first run, and I said, don't let him realize it's fake. He's not going to care about it anymore. And then you saw Cynthia's ability to move Knox away after the greeting, which we're going to talk a little bit about, but that's such an important step as well. But here he noticed the dog, which is going to be the first step. And then she intervened by saying, can you eat this please for a second? Because if you're at least eating, that gives you, it gives you leeway. It gives you the ability to continue to intervene down the road. We had a question in the chat. How do you evaluate the other dog's willingness to be approached with the go say hi? This is a really good question. So just because we're going to release our dog to go say hi doesn't necessarily mean the other dog wants to be said hello to, but this is actually why I love go say hi, because you have that control on your end. You can have the conversation with the owner, because your dog knows to sit and wait and look at you. Hey, is your dog friendly? Do they want to say hi? Don't always, pay attention don't always take that for granted if they say, yes, my dog is friendly, because unfortunately we sometimes miss canine body language and their dog might not want to say hi. But again, this is why I like go say hi, because it gives you that control. Your dog should eventually, when we are good with the training, they should wait till they hear go say hi to approach, and you can evaluate before that if you want to release them to go say hi. Another question, can this be applied to people passing by? Absolutely. I use go say hi all the time for greeting with people. And what I find helpful with the greeting with people is the back half, meaning your dog will have no problem going to approach, but we're going to work a lot on getting them back to you after they say hi. And so, yes, absolutely, this can be applied to people as well. Okay, so, all right, your dog is eating in the presence of another dog. You have the ability to squeeze in that moment of take this treat, and now I'm going to let you go. So now, how do we build on that? Now, if your dog can take a treat, I want you to see if you can lure them towards you so they're at least facing you a little bit before releasing them to go say hi. Now, the importance of this here is by using a treat lure, they're actually not having to think too much. So again, which the next step is going to be respond to your name, asking them to respond to their name still might be too hard. So let's help them make the right choice with a food lure. You're going to put that treat right on their nose, lure them towards you. Then you have closer to what you're looking for. You're at least facing in my direction. Now I'm going to release you to go say hi.
Oh! Good. Go say hi. Perfect. That's great.
Ready?
Good.
So you saw he had this moment of like, ooh, dog. Cynthia did a great job. She got his attention back using the food. Her criteria is still very low. All you have to do is follow this food with your nose. Then you're going to go be released and go say hi. All right. Now we're upping the criteria a little bit, right? So first, I need you to eat. Then I need you to eat facing me. Now, can you respond to your name or what I call a positive interrupter? So a positive interrupter are those noises you make that get your dog's attention. It is so important that you have attention cues that are not just your dog's name. That could be anything that causes your dog to go, "Oh, you need something from me?" And that's helpful to condition at home as well. So this is Knox responding to a cue, which is very different than the past two things we've done, which is, I'm going to help you make this choice. We are asking him to make a good choice here.
Yes. Go say hi. Good job.
So you can see Knox is starting to lose interest in the dog. And, but there it was Cynthia said his name, made a noise. He turned, the food was waiting for him and he got rewarded for it. So she didn't have to turn him. He made the choice to turn. It's also really important to note that clearly, as you can see, Knox and Cynthia have an incredible foundation where he knows to default back to her. He pays her tons of attention because he's been really heavily reinforced from that since a puppy. And that's what he's going to fall back on. And so you see that behavior a lot here when he doesn't necessarily know what to do. All right, so now we're going to make it a little bit harder. Not only am I going to ask you to look in my direction, I'm then going to cue you to sit. Now, it's important that we've worked on all the three things before because you cannot cue your dog to do something if they're not looking at you. So all the stuff we've put in place before is what is going to get us prepared for now asking for a behavior. And the thing about all the steps that we've put in place so far is that our dog is now realizing, oh, I can think when I see other dogs. I can listen to my owner. I can think, I can make choices, I can eat, versus their default, which is everything's turning off and I'm zoning in on the dog. So here you're going to do what end goal that we're hoping for, right? You're going to get a sit. She's going to cue a sit and and then release. Oh. So he saw the dog briefly. Oh, sorry, guys. I think I turned the volume off on this one. That's fine. But so he turned, and it's also important to note that in this sequence, for the best results, you are going to wait till your dog notices the dog first. So you want them to perceive the other dog, get the behavior you're looking for, and then release them to go say hi. If Knox hadn't noticed the dog and Cynthia simply asked him to sit, yes, cueing go say hi would tell him, oh, there's a dog here, but it wouldn't be as true of a kind of training sequence, a real life training sequence of you have to get your dog under control around other dogs, because theoretically he wouldn't have even known that the other dog was there if he hadn't seen it before she started intervening. So now I'm going to show you a video of on both ends. Cynthia's going to cue him to sit. He's going to go say hi, and then he's going to come back to a sit. So you have control before and after the greeting. Let me just, weird. All right, so he sat on the front end and the back end, and unfortunately the volume for whatever reason is not working, which is fine because you're still seeing the sit, go say hi, and sit. So now you have, again, control on both sides. So implementing a go say hi it's tricky. It's not easy, but it is so helpful. It teaches your dog you have the green light to approach. Now, the thing about a green light is if you don't get it, you're still at a red light, right? So that red light is still going to mean the default attention to me. Look at me, look at the dog, look back at me. All good stuff happens when you focus on me. And this time we're going to pass the dog and you're not going to get the go say hi. Maybe next time you will. It kind of depends, right? But this can be an absolutely critical, important piece to decreasing frustration. And so the second half of this is what happens after you've released to go say hi, right? Now, best case scenario, you keep leash greetings short and sweet, because when your dog associates on-leash greetings with play, 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 and they wrestle and they escalate, and it's this rough and tumble, great 5-minute experience for them, that's really fueling the obsession piece, right? I would definitely recommend keeping super, super short. Now, this is where your work of intervening, default attention, focusing on you is extremely important, because if you go in there and you try to get your dog's attention and they don't have a strong history of you calling them away, using their noise, kissing noises, pop, 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 and not predicting food for them, they will ignore you. They will. I'm telling you now, the behavior that they care more about, that is more reinforcing to them, will win in that moment. We had a good question, really great question. Shouldn't go say hi mean approaching the hind end and the butt sniffing instead of straight towards the nose? Absolutely. So on leash nose to nose greetings is definitely hard. I'm also very aware that the criteria to build in, okay, no, you don't approach the front, you approach the hind end, is going to make your life, it's going to be really hard to do. I think, yes, if you can set it up that you kind of walk your dog to the back end, that's great. But if you guys can at least get your dogs to sit and wait for the go say hi until you release, that's amazing. And then if you want to clean it up past that, yes, you approach the hind end. That would be great as well, because you're absolutely right that when nose to nose is really hard. I'm going to talk about why that's hard in a second, but we also, once we release go say hi, we only have so much control over what happens after that, which is why on-leash greetings, keeping them short is really helpful, and having a way to intervene is really helpful, because the longer on-leash greetings go on, the increased chances are either that A, your dog tunes you out, B, your dog starts playing and it becomes really, really reinforcing, which is going to make it harder to avoid in the future, or C, something goes south and somebody gets tense and somebody starts grumbling, and the interaction can turn into kind of maybe not super friendly anymore, right? So you need to have a way to intervene. And this is where the tool that is heavily reinforced, meaning your dog has a lot of history of getting food, when you make that noise, you say that word, or you say, maybe you've taught like a let's go or a pop, 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 and it always predicts food. You have to have heavy reinforcement for that, so that your dog chooses that in the when they're really excited sniffing another dog. Give your dog a behavior to fall back on. I don't know what to do here, so I'm going to focus on my human, meaning, oh, my human wants something. What could they want? Oh, they probably want attention, because that's what we've practiced over and over and over again. So the goal with default behaviors is that our dogs, in the absence of information, or if they're not sure, they fall back on these behaviors. So this is the second half of Toby's 1, 2, 3 video, where Kayla applies the go say hi and then interrupts the greeting while it's still short and sweet. And it is a really, really lovely example of keeping things super low stress, no big deal, go say hi, but then come back to me. A lot of good stuff for coming back to me, and it sets everybody up for success.
2, 3. Let's go say hi to Mosley. Go say hi. Hi.
Really nice greeting.
This way, Toby. Toby, come. That is so good.
Wonderful. Now, if Toby or your dog doesn't have a history of responding to Toby come, or those noises that we were making to get his attention, and there wasn't enough reinforcement that had happened there, Toby absolutely would have chosen to keep sniffing the dog and interacting with the dog. And then what happens is we're in this battle of adding leash tension and pressure, and the opposition reflex kicks in and our dog naturally pulls back. So you have to have a tool on the second half of the greeting, on the back half, to interrupt and get your dog away. To go back to Cynthia's videos, Cynthia and Knox have a really strong history of when Cynthia approaches with food to the nose, boop, 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 that means join me this way, we're leaving whatever we're doing. Because she's probably used that when he's younger as a way to redirect him away from, chewing on naughty stuff, digging, just get his attention away from something, get him to move towards something. So Cynthia and Knox have a really strong history, as do Kayla and Toby here. So they have those tools to intervene really quickly. This is another example from colleagues here in the DC area, Oscar-winning behavior. This is actually in their reactive dog class. So we're looking at the lighter dog here on the right, and this dog was very reactive before joining the class, and I think this was many weeks in, and the dog had greatly improved, and so they were practicing on-leash greetings. And you're going to see here the choice that the dog makes when the owners, I think they intervene. I'm going to have you watch it without sound, and you can see kind of the behavior that the dog knows to do when the humans try to get their attention. So that dog knew right away, okay, mom wants something, I'm going to approach and I'm going to wait for food. That is a behavior that they have practiced, that the dog knows. And if they had not had that practice, or the dog didn't know what that meant, that dog would not have probably responded as quickly or as nicely. And that's where it's really, really important to have those behaviors to fall back on. Because, and the nice thing is that if you're doing all your attention training at home, it shouldn't be much extra work to give yourself tools to interrupt leash greetings. It should be pretty easy to apply those fun positive interrupters, or a food lure, or something like that to get your dog's attention. It's not really going to be too much extra training. Okay, so we had another great question for on-leash greetings. Could you use clicker training to redirect the dog towards meeting in a more appropriate way, or target training using the fake dog? Absolutely, right? So there's a lot of creative solutions. Going back to, it is more appropriate for dogs to meet nose to butt and do that C-spine, sniffing to each other. So if you wanted to figure out ways to encourage your dog to head to the hind end and reinforce that choice, I think that's a great, great, great idea. So talking about all this stuff, how to prevent reactivity and how to improve leash greetings and stuff like that. That being said, it is completely normal for dogs to outgrow on-leash greetings. On-leash greetings are unnatural because these dogs are meeting nose to nose, which is very unnatural in the dog world. It's very hard for them to navigate. There's a lot of body shifting due to walking gear that makes it unnatural. Dogs can't read each other. And it's important to know your dog doesn't have to say hi to other dogs on leash, whether that's not some of the time or not at all. That's perfectly okay. In fact, I really like to teach dogs that they have to ignore other dogs, or the default is to ignore other dogs unless they hear go say hi. I think that's much easier. I think that I want to default to opting out of on-leash greetings unless maybe it's a dog that I know, or it's a dog we're familiar with, because as I said before, the other half of on-leash greetings, meaning the other dog, is you cannot control that at all. And someone might say that their dog is friendly and they're not. I unfortunately, just with a client a couple weeks ago, somebody asked from across the street, can our dog say hi? Mine is friendly. They walked them over on leash. The dog totally attacked my client's dog and did pretty bad damage. So you absolutely can never know or take someone's word about on-leash greetings. And so that's really important to keep that in mind when you are debating, do we say hi to this dog? Do we say hi to dogs in general? And especially that's why you have your control on the front end. Your dog is not going to automatically go unless they hear go say hi. And you have your get the heck out of there quickly behavior of, hey, follow me this way. All right. How do you teach the default to ignore other dogs? So that's where it's a really good question, right? Yeah, of course, in a perfect world, if your dog ignored other dogs, you wouldn't be here right now. But that is where you go back to the Engage-Disengage game and the 1, 2, 3 game, where you're teaching your dog, because while initially I'm rewarding them for looking, what rewarding them for looking eventually does is it takes the value and the novelty away from it. If I'm constantly trying to pull my dog's attention away and try to convince them, leave it, leave it, leave it, they never learn how to cope with seeing it. And if they can cope with seeing it, they pretty quickly are like, no big, I'll look back at you because that's what's going to pay better for me. So really good question. And also it's, I could talk for hours and hours about kind of reactivity and how to cope more with this stuff, and especially if it's a little bit fear-based, and know that there are some really wonderful on-leash courses. Like Your Dog's Friend has some great reactive dog courses. Even basic manners courses are going to help you with a lot of this stuff. And a lot of this stuff is online right now, which would be really beneficial for you to take. All right. Another question. What do you say to someone who says, can my dog say hi? He's friendly. This is a great question. And this is super important with your training because you might decide while you're working on your friendly dog's leash reactivity that you don't want your dog to say hi. You are wanting to choose away from that. So it's perfectly fine. And you can say that. And it's important that you say that, oh, he can't say hi right now. He's in training. Or, oh, no, sorry, he can't say hi right now. There are plenty of reasons. There are plenty of reasons why you can't say hi, and those reasons shouldn't matter to anyone but you. So absolutely advocate for your dog and say, sorry, we can't say hi right now, but thanks anyway. I don't like disappointing people. I don't like confrontation. And so that can be really hard for me, but it is so important to advocate for your dog, especially if you're not getting a good vibe from the other dog. Sorry, we're in training, but thanks. There's a lot of good options there. Okay. All right. So improvement around other dogs, in case I did not hit this home hard enough, improvement around other dogs depends on the training that you do at home. Foundations are, surprise, the foundation of your success. So again, your training goals, your foundation training goals is a default attention to handler, meaning your dog chooses to look up at you, just like Randy is doing in this picture with me here. You also want to teach your dog a super strong response to their name, and you also want to teach them a positive interrupter, another way to get their attention back to you. So I like to teach default attention and then build the foundation that way so that when I do have to start entering my voice, their name, positive interrupter, they are quick to turn back to me. Takeaways. So this is simply a summary of everything we talked about today. Friendly dogs can absolutely become frustrated on leash as they age, and this can absolutely cause reactivity. So start at home. Increase your dog's mental and physical exercise. Make sure that they're getting plenty of sniffing, chewing, and licking outlets throughout the day, and they're getting plenty of exercise, physical exercise. Train for 5 minutes a day and focus on those foundation training, the foundation attention to you goals. Play the Engage-Disengage game or the 1, 2, 3 game around other dogs from a distance to decrease frustration. Give yourself the advantage from a distance so that when you do try an on-leash greeting, you have your go say hi cue. Oh no. And it looks like my PowerPoint might quit on me in a second. So I will just finish and keep your leash greetings short. But I'm going to dive into questions right now because there's a lot of really, really good ones. Okay. All right. We good, Deborah, right, to move into questions? Okay. Got it. Okay. All right. So Rebecca's wondering, should you use high value treats in the house or can you use lower value treats? Rebecca, I'm so glad you asked because this is so important. You should not use your high value treats in the house. You should use as low value as possible in the house in a low distraction setting. You want to try to save all your high value stuff for outside where it's much harder. So really great question. And I'm glad you asked. Some examples of low value treats are your dog's kibble. Crunchy training treats are usually very low value. Again, we like squishy, stinky, and small. And then other training treats that your dog might go, meh, okay, I'll eat it, but probably would turn their nose up outside. Really great question. All right. Sana has asked, and apologize if I mispronounce your name. Once your dog has mastered the training with treats, is the goal to get them to do that behavior without treats? So this is a really good question. And for a lot of behaviors, just simple stuff, sit, down, touch, stuff like that. Yes, we want to try to move to what we call functional rewards, something in the environment that our dog enjoys. Attention, play, access to their food bowl, whatever it is. But for tricky behaviors like behavior around other dogs and reactivity, yes, one day you might have a dog that has new habits that doesn't need food anymore. But for these challenging behaviors, you absolutely would want to plan to use food for quite some time, because we're really working against kind of their natural desire to do stuff. And like I've talked about so much today, the motivation to do these behaviors is so strong. And so we would want to plan to use food for quite some time. So great question. Okay. Ashley's wondering, do you always tell reactive clients to avoid group classes? So I'm guessing you're asking like group classes, like basic manners classes. And this is a really good question, and it's definitely case by case basis. So I actually have a couple of clients who are reactive, but who are in a group class setting that works for them, meaning the instructors understand what the dog's needs, the dogs are pretty familiar with it, so they're not super reactive in class, the owners know how to manage, and so the group class is okay. But that is unlikely to be the case for most dogs, because group classes, there's a lot of dogs, it's a small space, it can be really overwhelming. So it really depends on the dog. And you would know pretty quickly if you went to a group class and the dog started barking and reacting and couldn't think and couldn't learn, then that's not really good for anybody. Great question. All right, so apologize for the pause while I scroll through these questions. Good question. Okay. Whiskey's mom is here. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, Gigi. Starts pawing the other dog to initiate play when allowed to greet, and then the other dog gets annoyed and things go boom. So Whiskey initiates a greeting, annoys the other dog. We talked about, that can happen. The other dog gets upset, tells Whiskey off, and Whiskey reacts back. Great example of everything we talked about happening. So this is where I think being able to interrupt a greeting is super important. So having some type of cue, and I don't even care if you have to go in there with a food lure, if you have to put a treat right on your dog's nose and pull and kind of encourage them to come out, high value treat, feed, to get away, to interrupt the behavior. I think that's going to be an important way to decrease the chances that the interaction falls apart. So keep things short and sweet, even if it's off leash. I don't care. Say hi to the dog, check back with me. Say hi to the dog, check back with me. And then if you have a history of checking back, then when you do say, Whiskey, he's more likely to be like, oh, mom wants something and I've been getting good food from her, so I'm going to redirect to her pretty quickly. Really good question. Okay, another great question. Is it okay to play the Engage-Disengage game outside of dog parks if you also utilize dog parks, or does this create confusion? Great question, and absolutely you can. So I also will use the Engage-Disengage game. Remember, step 1, look at the trigger, get food. Step 2, look at the trigger, look back at me. I use this game for squirrels. I use it for playing with dogs. I use it for getting to say hi to people. And of course, some of the time our dogs do get to play with other dogs or do get to say hi to people, but we're simply giving them new behaviors to do around these things that, yes, sometimes they get to approach and greet and interact with, but right now we're saying you don't. And I think that's a really, really great opportunity. I would be really mindful, if your dog loves the dog park, of staying maybe really far away initially, so that they are really likely to be successful in those moments and not going right up, because then they would think that they're going in. Great question. All right, I'm going to scroll through again. Thank you, everybody, all 60 of you who are still here. You're barking at anyone passing by. Okay, so a question about, what about dogs who bark within a fence for anyone passing by at a distance? So this is obviously a super common behavior, barking at the fence, the same thing. And I think we had another question of dogs barking out the window. Okay, you absolutely can do Engage-Disengage. You see the thing, you don't bark, you get food. You see the thing, you look back at me, you get food. This is a really great opportunity to practice this. But every time that your dog is out there without you, or the dog is, every time the dog is practicing this behavior uninterrupted or unmanaged, they're getting really good at it. And the same goes for on-leash greetings. Maybe you practice go say hi for one on-leash greeting, and then the next 4 that day, you let the dog do whatever they want. they're rehearsing unwanted behavior and it's going to slow your progress. So for something like barking out the window at home or barking from the yard, I would definitely implement management. And I also have, I don't mean to keep plugging my other YouTube stuff. These are such great questions and I could talk about them forever, and they are talked about at pretty great lengths in this, the COVID YouTube series Management, where I talk about how to control the environment to decrease unwanted behavior, which is a wonderful solution if you don't feel like standing out there all day long teaching your dog a new behavior when they see something. Barbara's wondering if we should bring treats into the dog park or not. Okay. There's a lot of reasons why you shouldn't bring treats into the dog park, mainly because you would get all the other dogs to totally mob you and go nuts. But it's also part of a place in the world where you really need your dog's attention, right? So I don't want you practicing your recall all day long and then going into the dog park and not feeding that beautiful response to the recall. So what I usually will do is bring something really discreet that I can slip to my dog really fast and shove it in their mouth and whoop, what was that? So your dog knows you have it, but hopefully the other dogs don't know you have it, because I think it's really important. All right, quick question about Engage-Disengage. Again, it's just we are rewarding our dogs for engaging with the trigger in a calm way. We're rewarding them for looking and not barking. They're getting food for that. And then the disengage is step 2, where down the road they start to realize looking at stuff pays. So they see something, a trigger, and then they look back at you. So you're rewarding them for engaging calmly and then disengaging. Okay. All right, I'm going to keep going. It looks like we got a lot of great questions. I think there was some at the beginning that I missed. Okay. Somebody has a dog that is 16 months old, so tail end of adolescence, depending on the size of the dog, and the dog gets frustrated, but the frustration then turns towards the human, which we see this a lot. And you would definitely, so it can manifest in leash biting. It can manifest in jumping and biting the sleeves and stuff like that. And this is very common when a dog feels frustrated. Maybe, and this is actually good to kind of revise my reactivity definition, right? It's not necessarily always barking, lunging towards another dog. It could be turning back to the owner, jumping, grabbing sleeves, stuff like that. All the same stuff that we did today, that I went over today, is going to help with that, because it's just about managing that frustrated emotion and trying to help your dog not get those big feelings of frustration. Really good question. So sometimes our dog is great on leash, and sometimes she takes a dominant position, which probably sounds like she's making herself really big and standing over the dog, not super polite. And this leads to escalation. So we never know when that's going to happen. Really great point, right? So that's why we have the ability to interrupt a greeting and quickly, right? 3 seconds. I usually say greetings should be about 3 seconds. Sniff, sniff, come back to me for food. Then maybe I say, okay, sniff, sniff again, but come back again. So really good question. We want to make sure that we're keeping those greetings super short and things can't escalate. So we had a question about, and I'm glad that this was brought up because I didn't get a chance to talk about it, but it is really important. So much reactive behavior is fear-based and it gets punished physically. What's your view on that? So a lot of times we are tempted to punish the behaviors we're seeing. So correct the barking with a leash correction. Maybe you're using a prong collar or a bark collar or shock collar, anything like that, the dog would show a behavior and it would suppress the behavior. Oh, I didn't like the way that felt. I'm not going to do it in that moment. But if you remember back to where we started to talk about how frustration leads to a negative conditioned emotional response, and negative CERs are what cause the reactivity in the first place, that frustrated negative feeling is what's causing the reaction. And if you think then, okay, so you're frustrated, so you bark, and you're frustrated, you're not feeling good, so you bark, and then you correct the barking. So now you're frustrated and you can't express it, and it hurts or it's uncomfortable when you try to express it. That's going to make that negative CER very much worse over time, and it's going to cause probably more reactivity in the long run. Or if your dog is barking out of frustration, but they still are friendly off leash, it could actually unfortunately cause your dog to go from barking out of frustration to barking out of like, oh, I just don't like seeing you, and then could potentially cause aggression on leash or off leash as well. So we really want to be careful about what associations we're building around other dogs, which you'll notice all the training techniques today should decrease stress. They should build good things for your dogs, great incompatible behaviors, a lot of communication between you and the dog, and should decrease that stress and frustration and negative feelings, and versus correcting can unfortunately make all that stuff a lot worse. Great question. Okay, I'm gonna scroll back. Jill had a question. Okay. All right. Jill has a question that I think I can apply to everyone. If my dog is great on leash in contexts where we've never had on leash greetings versus on walks when she goes from 0 to 100 and screams, should I do all this as though she doesn't know how to give attention, etc., for the places we're having problems? Okay, so I think your question is, should you start from square one? And feel free to change that. But I do, okay. So I think the question is always, or I think the answer is always go back and work on the basics and act as, kind of plan as if, what is it, like plan for the worst and not hope for the best. But if you plan for the worst, then you're less likely to get fallout from maybe skipping steps or from not, for not training the way that we maybe should have to have the most effective change in behavior. So I think across the board, if your dog has problems in some scenarios, I think you would just plan across the board to kind of go back to square one, teach this default focus and attention. Even if it's not really an issue in some places, I would still recommend really brushing up on those foundation skills and just using it as an opportunity to practice in non-challenging environments. Because advanced behavior, so all the stuff we talked about today, nice greetings, go say hi, being good on leash, all this stuff. This is all just the foundations and the basics done really, really well, but it's hard to apply. But if you don't have those good foundations, then you will really, you're not going to see progress. Okay. Thank you guys for being here. Oh yes. Thank you, Suzanne, for asking that question again. Okay. So for Engage-Disengage, this is a really good question. Okay. So you've done step one. So your dog looks and gets food for looking, and they're starting to disengage on their own, meaning they're not staying hyper-focused and they're not really caring as much about the trigger, but instead of disengaging and saying, looking back at you, they're just kind of disengaging and looking away. So I think that what that says is that the dog probably doesn't necessarily, okay, a couple things. They might not care about what food you have, or if they do care about what food you have, they haven't necessarily connected that seeing a trigger predicts that tasty food that they want. Because if they knew that connection, then they would look at the dog and know to look back at you for that food. So I think it might mean that maybe something isn't totally translating, or they haven't made the connection. So maybe you go back and practice always feeding for looking with something really high value that they want, and then they connect to step two. You can always prompt, so they look at the dog, they look away, and maybe you do something to get them to look back at you. But I really, in case I didn't make it clear today, I really don't like nagging. I don't like having to constantly ask for the behavior I'm looking for. I like for the dogs to make these choices on their own, and that usually comes down to capturing and taking me out of the equation until they've done what I've wanted. Really great question. But if they're looking away from, talking about rewarding the smallest success point and making sure we're rewarding frequently, I mean, if they're not reacting and you don't care if they look totally back at you, you can of course reward that. But I think for the best results, you might go back a step and see if you can get a nice clean look all the way back at you. All right. I think we're coming up on pretty much. Somebody mentioned that they've seen this frustration in their 4-month-old puppy. That's why we want to go back all the way from the beginning to make sure that you're preventing this frustration. Really great questions, everybody. Okay. So Lisa asked a really good question that I want to make sure I get to, because this can be really hard for dog owners to wrap their head around. In Engage-Disengage, we are asking our dogs to look calmly at triggers, right? And the biggest reason for this is because looking calmly at a trigger is much easier than looking away from a trigger. And if we have our criteria for them to look back at us, to see the trigger and look back at us, a lot of dogs at this stage cannot accomplish that. It is too hard, and then we lose the opportunity to reinforce them. So we say, sure, look at that, great. Look at that, great. And they are able to meet their criteria. In addition, I don't like distracting past triggers, encouraging our dogs to, okay, you see a dog over there, you see it before your dog, so you get your dog's attention and you distract past the trigger. That's a great management tool, but that's not teaching your dog how to cope with seeing the trigger. So I say, initially, you're going to see the trigger and you're going to get food for seeing it. And because you've gotten high value food for looking at it calmly so much, you're going to start to realize the trigger's no big deal. There's some counter conditioning going on there. And you're going to start preemptively looking back at me, knowing that dogs now produce food for you. So really good question. And like I said, it's a little bit different, but the success is, it happens because we lower criteria and we say, I'm going to make this easier for you so you can be successful, and we'll go from there. Really great question. Oh my God, there's still 60 of you here. This is wonderful. Okay. And I'm only going to go till 4. So we'll go about 7 more minutes. And I think there's some, Jill had a great question. Do you toss food from your hand? Do you toss food on the ground or give it from your hand? So you probably noticed that I was feeding Lola from the ground in a couple of my videos. I think feeding from the ground can be really beneficial in some scenarios where your dog is fixated and you want to get them food and you want them to break their focus. So you turn their attention to the ground. I think that it is really helpful for that. But I've actually been feeding more from my hand lately because I also like to reinforce that all good things come up from me. So I think it can be kind of depending on what training scenario you're doing and how fixated your dog is. I really like, again, to build the all good things come from up here. But feeding on the ground can help break focus. Really, really great question. And there's also benefit to, if you scatter a bunch of treats, doing some find it sniffing games. That can be really helpful for dogs that are overstimulated over the top as well. Great question. Beth asked, do you cue that there is a trigger present? So I personally do not, meaning some people will say, and I think like Kayla does this with Toby, and I think it can be really effective. Where is it? Or like, are you looking, or something like that, that will prompt the dog to go, okay, I know that there's a trigger. Let me go look for it. And where I think this can be really valuable is because, again, that predictability. Your dog knows that when you say, where is it? They should look for something. When they see it, they'll look back at you for food. So I think that can be a really valuable way to address it. I just am a really quiet trainer and I like to take my voice out of the equation as much as possible. So I don't cue it, but I have definitely been stuck in times where I say, it would be helpful to cue my dog to look around right now. Really great question. Okay, Lindsay had a great question. Should you increase the distance between you and the trigger if your dog freezes or does a hard stare rather than a calm stare? This is such a great point. And Lindsay, I'm so glad you brought it up. So absolutely, there's a difference between your dog going like this, there's a dog, and your dog going like this, there's a dog. They're two very different emotional states. And the goal with this training is to work under thresholds. So that would mean that your dog should be able to look at triggers like this. There's something there. Oh, there's a dog. Again, not like, oh my God, the dog, where they're fixated and they're stuck and they're tense and they are really intense. So yes, I would absolutely recommend increasing your distance there. And that might be a scenario where if your dog is too fixated, and you maybe you say yes, so you try to get that food to them and they're not taking it, they're not breaking their attention, maybe I would put the treat on the ground and see if we can get their focus that way. But more so it's kind of data to me like, okay, they're a little too fixated here. I don't love this. Okay. What if a dog gets sharky when aroused? This is a really good question. Hopefully, I think you mean that they take food really hard because, and what this is this is a physiological response. So if you have a dog who takes treats really calmly at home and then you get outside and suddenly they're taking your fingernails off, that is because they have tension built up in their body and they can't actually control that. Meaning if you were to then say, oh, take it gentle or stuff like that, you would probably find yourself in a bit of a battle because your dog, they can't control how when they snatch something like that. So that's data to you again, okay, wow, they're really taking treats hard. They're pretty aroused right now. They're pretty over threshold, or they might be getting over threshold. Maybe I give them some distance. Definitely if your dog is getting really sharky, I think that's a great time to drop treats on the ground so that they don't take your fingers off. You can also try licking. Peanut butter to go things are great for tough mouths because you can lick. Barbara brought up the good either point or question, but it's worth mentioning. Oh my God, so many great questions, guys. Okay, I'm gonna try to get through these quickly. If you click or you mark and your dog doesn't turn back to you for the food, that means that they're about to be over threshold. So you wanna get some distance. You wanna use that food to turn their face. Do these techniques work on triggers such as bunnies or squirrels? Absolutely. I love the Engage-Disengage game for predatory behavior. Absolutely. You want to cue your dog to look. Okay. You want to cue your dog to look for what? Are you asking them to see another dog or look for treat you throw on the ground? Oh, good question. So I have a cue. Okay, so the question was, are you cueing your dog to look for another dog or are you cueing your dog to look for food on the ground? So food on the ground I have a cue for that. It's find it. Some people use scatter as a look on the ground for food. Sometimes people use a cue, where is it? Which means look around for the trigger to get treats for looking back. Treat because you should. Oh, okay, Barbara, your question. So if you mark, you say yes or you click, and the dog does not look back at you, you absolutely want to get that food to them because yes, we want that marker and that treat to have that 1-to-1 ratio. But more importantly, if they don't look back at you, again, that's information that they might be over threshold and you need to either lure their head away, get them some distance. That's not a great place for learning. We want a nice relaxed, oh, I heard the click and look back at you. Really great question. Okay, what do you do when they're too fixated? So this is where we want to be really mindful of our threshold. So if your dog is too fixated on something and they're not eating and not responding to food, I will do usually an emergency U-turn where I turn into the dog and I physically will break their eyesight. So I'm starting to walk and I'm kind of trying to get them to walk with me and then rushing the other direction. Something I would recommend practicing so that your dog knows, oh, we're U-turning, we're heading this way, and just really trying to avoid getting so close to the other dog that your dog goes over threshold like that. Really good question. And know that all this work, we really want this work to be done when they can look and they're not fixating. Do you call their names to get them to engage? So again, I really try to keep my voice out of the equation. I want this sequence to be something that the dog chooses to do on their own. So the only thing that I'm saying when it comes to engage, disengage is as soon as they look at the trigger, I mark that yes, and I feed. So I am not calling, I will sometimes call the name away, but again, you can get really trapped into just saying their name, saying their name, saying their name. Fluffy, 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 and Fluffy tunes you out like, first 5 minutes of the walk. So I really like to capture behaviors that I like so that then if I'm, marking them, yes, feed. And then suddenly I say Fluffy, they're like, oh my God, your voice, what do you need? That must be serious. So I try to avoid using their name to get their attention initially around triggers, especially around triggers. They learn to ignore it. All right, Barbara made a really good point. Kiko Pup, who is a great resource. Kiko Pup YouTube has a great Let's Go video. I think it's really important to practice Let's Go, especially in the context of dogs who would rather meet other dogs or are reactive to other dogs. You need to have a cue that says, let's go. And they say, I know what let's go means. I'm going to run with you this direction because we have it practiced. In case you guys haven't noticed, all this stuff comes down to how much you have practiced and how much history and memory they have with this outside of seeing triggers. Okay, it is 4:00 and I would love to just sit and talk to you guys for more hours. You have had such wonderful questions. 55 of you are still here. Amazing. I guess I'm going to let Deborah sign off.
Well, thank you, Juliana. This was really, really
Oh,
good.
thank you.
You're getting a lot of thank yous from people that I hope you notice.
Thank you.
And we'll see all of you next time. Probably November 14th, if you can make either of those, or in the winter. Okay, take care.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you spending your Saturday afternoon here.